Hey everyone, welcome to this special webinar on nonprofit leadership during the coronavirus pandemic. We're really glad you could join us. You'll notice my name is Charles. I'm from Ideation, and I'll be hosting this conversation. We have some really great panelists here with us today. If you are a participant just joining us, you'll see some features here like the Q&A button. In a moment, we'll also launch some polling just to get some feedback from folks here, but you're welcome to ask questions. I'm going to start off with some questions here, and we are recording this, and we'll offer it as a resource post-webinar for others. I know more people are probably going to jump in the next few minutes. Why don't we do this? If I could just ask each of the panelists to give a brief 10, 15-second intro of who you are and what you do. So I'm going to just point and we'll kind of work through this together. First, let me introduce Justin Wheeler, as well as Andrew from his team. If you can just make a brief intro of what you guys are doing and why we have two of you here on the panel today, that'd be great. Justin, you want to go for it?
Absolutely. Hey everyone, my name is Justin. I'm founder, CEO at Fundraise. We're a technology platform helping nonprofit organizations raise money online, and as of currently helping organizations turn virtual or canceled events into virtual events. And yeah, happy to be a part. There's two of us today because unfortunately I have to drop off at 10:15 or in 15 minutes, and then Andrew, who has lots of experience in the fundraising space, also works here at Fundraise, will be taking over for me.
Great. How about you, Chris?
Hey everyone, Chris Marlowe with Help One Now. We run a global program that does family empowerment in 8 countries around the world.
Great. Let's go to Hannah. Hannah, can you hear us?
It cut out for a second. Hi everyone, I'm Hannah Song from Liberty in North Korea. We're an international NGO, and we help North Korean refugees escape through a 3,000-mile modern-day underground railroad, helping them to reach safe countries like South Korea and the United States, and helping them to get reintegrated. And we also just work on the long-term issue of North Korea as a whole. How can we accelerate and open North Korea in the long term? Thanks for having me, Charles.
Great, thanks for being here. Matt, why don't you share a little bit of what you do?
Yeah, I'm Matthew Immersion, and I'm the founder of Every Monday Matters, and we're a nonprofit organization that is creating a world where everyone knows how much and why they matter. Our two main programs are we have a education curriculum K through 12 that we reach about 2 million students a week across the country and in a couple other countries, and we also have a corporate program that helps companies create work cultures where people feel like they matter and they're valued at work as well. And that's great. Thanks for having me, Charles.
Thanks, Matt. Let's go to Dusty.
Charles, thanks for the invitation. Dusty Rubeck, I'm CEO of CDF Capital. We're a 65-year-old, $600 million revolving loan fund for churches around the country. We provide capital primarily for independent evangelical churches, financial capital, leadership capital, spiritual capital. I've been in fundraising about 32 years, 25 of those from a CEO's chair.
Great. Thank you, Dusty. Great to have you. And then last but not least, definitely Hendrik.
Hey, Charles. Thank you for the opportunity. Hi, everybody. Hendrik Kutsia, based in Orange County, California, and I do executive coaching for large multinational companies, global companies, and work with their executive teams around executive development and obviously managing through the scenario right now. Great.
Well, everyone's here joining us. Thank you for carving out some time in your busy day. I know things are constantly changing by the hour, and I thought this would be an important conversation to hopefully add some value to nonprofit leaders who are joining us, as well as, hopefully we'll also walk away with potentially new connections and a sense that we definitely don't have to do this alone. I think nonprofit leaders out of any other quote unquote industry, if you will, find ways to root for each other, help each other out, collaborate. And so hopefully that will be the outcome of this type of gathering. I want to start off, and I'm going to ask some of our panelists specific questions to begin with, and then we'll open up for some Q&A for those of you who are tuning in. Let's start with Hendry. You've been an executive coach, and you've helped executives through some really difficult times and in crisis. And you know, this type of pandemic is probably a whole new level of leadership maneuvering. What are some things that executives of nonprofits right now should be mindful of as they kind of march forward and trying to not just manage this, but lead well?
Thank you, Charles. Yeah, I would say what's really important is communication. Obviously, I think everybody knows the word, but let's dive deeply into that. What does that mean in this scenario? I think there's two parts where the leaders need to lead. Obviously, on the business side, and then on the people side, right? On the business side, as it's looking right now, this is not a gust of wind. This is a much longer effect and a long tail story that will be around for a while. And so on the leadership part, on the business side, I think it's really important to huddle together, ask the experts to come in from different sides, and then what I call bring point B closer, right? You want to make sure that the goals that you're setting are clear for the week and then the month. One of the challenges is when you're doing virtual meetings, there really are two types of meetings. There's probably more, but two types on the business side that are important. One is the processing meeting, and the other one is the action meeting. And you need to make a distinction with your people. Where are we processing what's going on, and another time where we're actually talking about what we're going to do about it, and not confuse those two meetings, because what you'll find is people are often wanting to process. And that's what the leader can do one-on-one. Do the one-on-one processing as much as you can, so that when you're doing a collective meeting, you can focus on the work and focus on the momentum that you're generating out of that. Your people have a need to process, and that is a legitimate thing that needs to happen. But if you confuse the processing meeting for the action meeting, you're not going to get anything done. And so make that distinction. I think there's a number of business issues that we can talk about that need to be addressed, but I want to move to the second part, which is the leadership with regards to the people side. In any type of traumatic event or pandemonium or panic, you have about 7 minutes, if it's an event, to create order. And so part of the work is to create order in the middle of chaos. And one of the challenges in our scenario is people usually want detail. We don't have detail to offer because the detail is unfolding, so there's a lot of uncertainty. So the leader's job in that environment is to provide direction. You're being asked for detail. Your response is direction, and then also matching that direction with your commitment. So what that sounds like is, hey, I really understand what you're asking me. I've considered this. Let me make sure that I've heard what you're saying. You're asking for this. We're going to get back to you on that. Here's what we do know. We are heading in this direction. This is what we're going for. This is what we're doing. And you can count on us as a leadership team to work in the situation and through the situation. So now you've provided direction and you've provided your commitment. That tends to a large degree, calm the majority of folks down. What's important then is to have cadence in your communication. Charles, I think what's really there is letting people know when you're going to be talking about when shifts are going to be made. Maybe you make that on a daily basis, depending on your business, and maybe you do that twice a week, but let people know on Tuesday at 5 p.m. and on Thursday at 5 p.m., we will let you know exactly what's going to happen. And that's when we discuss that. And so at that point, we will talk about these three things every Tuesday, every Thursday, and you can count on us. People need a good source for that information. They need some sense of stability. So when you provide that cadence, then people know what to expect, right? And I think creating that clarity, be neutral about the facts, right? So when you're talking about scenarios, I mean, a lot of people are going to have to deliver very difficult news to people. So be neutral about the facts, and be compassionate when it comes to the people. And then I'll add just one more thing, Charles, is be very careful as a leader to not make promises from your passion or compassion. You can't make promises that you can't keep, because your promises will lead to expectations that you then have to manage and may have to walk back. So as much as it's possible, stay neutral about the scenario, about the facts, compassionate about the people without making promises that you can't keep. Because you may be doing that from a place of emotion and not from a place of clarity. And, it's better to say, I don't know, and we're in this together, and you have my commitment for us to work it out, than for you to say, you can count on me to fix this. Well, you don't know that that's true.
Yeah, that's great insight. I think we're going to actually piggyback off of that in just a moment, but I do want to recognize that since Justin has to kind of jump off in a couple of minutes, and Andrew, thanks for kind of tag teaming with Justin today about technology. So Justin, before you leave, could you tell us a little bit, like from a technology perspective, in a moment like this, I'm sure there's degrees of preparation as to what type of technologies are needed. What are some questions that nonprofit leaders maybe should be asking during this time? And then we could talk with Andrew later about different types of tools. But when you think about technology in a moment like this, what are some thoughts that rise to the surface of your mind?
Yeah, I mean, first I could just listen to Henrik keep on talking, because that was very, very helpful in running my own business. But I think that, one of the things, taking one step back on that question, is if we take a look at like major events that have happened in history as it relates to the nonprofit sector, whether it was the recession, disasters, what we tend to see is household giving actually increases during this time, not decreases. And we actually see, major donors, foundations, that's where we start to see contraction happen. And so I think as it relates to households, what technology do you have in place to cultivate and engage with households? These are going to be individuals that will likely carry you through this hard time, and having the resources to be able to reach them, whether it's through, live streaming events, taking your events virtual, whether it's through more digital campaigns, getting your mission out there in front of the right groups of people. And so, I think that it's been a long time coming. I think nonprofits have made great strides over the last 5 years to take technology more seriously. And I think this is like one of the first true tests that is going to give nonprofits the opportunity to weather the storm, because technology will allow you to continue raising funds regardless of having to host events or meet with donors face to face. I mean, Zoom is absolutely crushing it now, because it's literally hosting everything for everyone virtually, schools, businesses, and so forth. And so I think it's just to weather the storm today, you're going to have to leverage technology to raise those funds. And so that's what I see from my perspective.
That's really helpful. And seriously, thanks. I know by the hour things are changing, so I appreciate you kind of stopping by and loaning us Andrew as well. Dusty, you've been in an executive leadership role with nonprofits for, you said, 32 years or so. And during that time, I'm sure there have been moments, and every situation is unique. One of the things that you do really well right now is think in terms of like strategically problem solving. And I know that you and I have conversed a little bit on and off about like second order thinking and how important that is in the midst of solving problems. Tell us a little bit about like how second order thinking could help nonprofit leaders navigate these times.
Yeah, I think one of the critical things, and I really appreciate the comments that have already been made, there is going to be tough news coming from all of us in leadership to people that we have a lot of compassion for. So I just got that piece. I think one of the things to look at, the way we would apply the second level thinking, would be in our scenario planning. So the difficulty right now is everybody wants a crystal ball. They want the leader to have the crystal ball. I don't have the crystal ball. Nobody has it. And so we really focus in times like these on scenario planning. And so very, very early on, when this started to develop, we began to put together the scenario for our clients, for our customers. What's the likely worst case scenario? What's the best case scenario? And I think that if you're using or involving more of the people in your team to develop what those scenarios look like, the tough decisions become quite obvious to them. And so again, in this case, we're looking at a best case, a base case, a worst case. And the thing about these models, it's not a crystal ball. All models are wrong. Some of them are helpful. But clearly, it allows everyone to see, here's 3 basic paths, and we start watching for the milestones. If it goes this way, this is the likely scenario, and we can build our plans. But again, what I've seen is if you do that type of shock testing, the people who are involved in the planning pretty early on, they internalize to themselves, there's going to be some tough decisions. Don't know what those are going to be yet, but we agree to the best of our ability that this is what the future is going to look like. So Charles was referring to the article I'd sent out this morning, just the old statement of never tear down a fence until you know what it was put there first for. And I think one of the real challenges for us in decision making right now is it's a bit of a crisis time. We want to jump to things. You've got team members who need to make very short-term decisions. You've got to be making very long-term decisions. And so if you don't have that scenario and how we exit out of this, you're going to have people making short-term decisions that actually make the matter worse for you. Several days ago, I sent out a memo to our team. We're looking at churches who are shut down nationwide. They can't come together for physical services. I sent out the memo several days ago saying, here's all the things those churches are going to face when we come out of this, because we're going to come out of this. Now, we might be 6 weeks, we might be 6 months away from that. Nobody wants to talk about that right now, but it was just part of that saying, the next step in the future is going to be this. As you're making decisions, it's got to fit into that.
That's really helpful. So I want to talk to Hannah and Chris and even Matt. I know all of you have programs that are being heavily impacted by what's happening right now. You have leaders in the field. Matt, in your case, you work with so many schools and after-school programs and corporations. A lot of things are going kind of virtual. Chris, you're international in multiple continents, working with leaders on the ground, still serving people and families and such. And Hannah, you were already in a very dangerous work, and then you add this another layer. Maybe one of you 3 can kind of briefly share a little bit about like what are you thinking about right now in trying to approach the ever-changing landscape, and what are some things that maybe you've learned in this short period of time that you should focus on versus things maybe you shouldn't focus on right now? Any initial thoughts?
Yeah, I can say, Charles, we just spent 3 hours this morning kind of trying to wrap our minds around the different layers. And I think when you run a nonprofit, Help One Now, internally we call it the Circle of Empowerment. We have these brilliant leaders that we serve around the world. We're invisible in their communities. And so they are leading change and innovation in their communities. And we are the support structure for them on many levels, but they're the shot callers. And so then, of course, we have our just amazing donor base, from church partners to individual donors to corporate donors. And for us, one of the things we want to do is we think clarity is kindness, and we want to drive clarity for both of those people. On the international side, the conversation we have again and again and again is what happens if something goes wrong with Help One Now. And so much of the funding, is coming through us. And so we always have this conversation, and we always have follow-up plans. And now none of us thought it would happen this quickly for every single entity of humanity, right? Everyone's being affected in a way that we never thought would be possible at one time. And so our leaders are wanting to know, like, is it going to be okay? Is there calm? Do we need to change anything? So how do we drive clarity to our partners? But also we have donors who have sacrificed so much for Help One Now. And one of the things we realize with our donor base is they need clarity as well. We're seeing donors already shut down businesses, restaurants, coffee shops, corporations. Their whole lives are changing. So one of the things that we want to do is provide a little grace and space to our donors. And hey, we got our international covered for this many months. Don't worry about us right now. Be okay with focusing on yourself, because we're going to need you for the long haul more than the short haul. And so for a lot of our donors, they care so much about the projects that we're all involved in, but just to give them a little bit of space to breathe and focus on their own current lives, knowing that, hey, we're going to need you for the long game more than the short game. And so we're just doing all we can to drive clarity to every key important piece of the puzzle. I'm hoping that will give people space to like be calm and focus on the big picture, not the short game.
Great. That's wisdom. Hannah or Matt, you want to share? Hannah, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, what's happened and started happening a few weeks ago, about a month ago, it began to directly impact our work. The bulk of our rescue work actually begins in China and then continues through to Southeast Asia. And then, of course, actually, most of our post-resettlement work, and we have a large team as well, is in South Korea. So we've been kind of dealing with this over the last month or so as things were pretty escalated over there for a while. I really appreciate all the comments that were made earlier because I think they ring so true. What people needed was just clarity. What are we going to do and what's going on? And that goes across the board for our staff and our teams on the ground. What are we supposed to do for our partners? Obviously, they can't move people. It's literally things are at a standstill in China, not being able to move people, throughout the country. And despite the dangers that are involved in our work, we're having to scramble to find solutions then for North Koreans who are there in limbo and are having to seek shelter because we can't move them. And again, they're at risk of being caught by the Chinese government. They're still, facing these various risks. And so I think, one of the first things that we had to do was just really figure out what are the things that are in our control and that are not in our control, and really start to focus on the things that we can begin to affect. And that really had to do with focusing on our people first and the people that we're working with and serving. And so coming up with some pretty quick action steps immediately, communicating that clearly to the teams, making sure everyone was on the same page, and then making sure that things don't come to a standstill. Our teams on the ground, especially in Southeast Asia, are still able to move about and do reconnaissance work because we know that the work is going to pick up again and it is going to start. We don't know when, but we want to be ready when that happens. And so same thing in South Korea, we have to make a quick pivot. And we went online, we went virtual. We may not be able to continue to go and visit North Koreans that have just resettled and do these home visits and do these orientations, but there's so much we can do online. And fortunately, South Korea is incredibly technologically advanced. And so it really helps to facilitate our ability to do that and to make that pivot quickly. And then lastly, I think it's really just communicating, as was just mentioned, to our donors and supporters. We wanted to make sure that people knew, hey, we're having to put all of this work on hold for now, because we know that we're anticipating in a few months' time, in a few weeks' time, when we have to put out a quarterly impact report, you're not going to see much because we weren't able to do much activity at all. And while I'm sure people will understand and know because of everything that's going on, we wanted to have that transparency up front. And the really amazing and surprising thing was actually in response to just that simple update, we actually had people who were donating. There wasn't even a call to action to donate and to give, but I think people appreciated that update, and they too knew that, hey, as soon as it's possible, Link's going to begin their work again, and we want to make sure that the funds are there to help them to make sure that they can do that.
Good. That's very good.
Charles,
How about you, Matt?
Oh,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just going to say those are really great points. I think one of the challenges for not-for-profit leaders right now is in a crisis like this, giving may go up a lot, it may go down a lot. We don't know exactly. What we do know is that it will shift. Anytime there's a crisis, what people prioritize is going to shift. And what's going to cause it to shift? It's the stories and the communication that you have with them. So I think it's easy. I think it's easy in the middle of a crisis to get focused in telling donors how we see the crisis, and instead going to the next point of saying, how do the people we serve see the crisis? So if you're dealing with homeless people, it's a pretty easy message. There's no homeless person out there that's worried about their 401k tanking last week. They're worried that only 1% of the cars are driving by to give them some money. If you're working with seniors, They're already dealing with loneliness. Now they're isolated. They already have health problems. And now every news program in the world has told them they're going to get it and they're going to die. And their 401k does make a difference. And so I think when you're talking about rescuing people out of a country and really being able to capture that story of, hey, this is tough for us, but you think about that person who is just getting ready to be able to exit, and now everything's shut down because of that. I think the more we can focus those stories on how our people are experiencing the crisis, money is going to move. It's going to move towards the direction of those who tell that story well.
It's really good. Yeah. Matt, you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, Rusty, you what you just shared is amazing, and everyone, like, I'm so glad I'm on this panel just so I can learn from everybody as an attendee. At Every Monday Matters, we're in a unique place as everybody is, and part of our challenge right now is that we are pretty much every audience that we serve, the dynamic is different today. And so, for example, our education program, now as of just this morning, they're looking like schools might be shut down all the way through summer, and we're providing school curriculum for thousands of educators to lead with their students. And so just this morning, Jocelyn, our director of education, I talked about, do we need to even shift our program completely to not be necessarily educator based but parent or guardian based for home lesson plans. And so we might have to do a complete redesign on the program that we've been providing to a very large audience on that side. On the corporate side, obviously there's been a lot of communication around, I think safety and, we as a company, we care for you and your well-being. But I feel like another place where we're shifting to is to say, but how are people feeling, and your employees feeling, and the anxieties and the depressions and the working from home and the isolation and the depression? How can we look to shift some of our corporate programming to kind of speak to that mental and emotional well-being for their people? And Rusty, you just nailed another one, because we were just about to launch our pilot into assisted living communities, and that's kind of been put on hold. So we're kind of in this place really of, we're big communicators already, because I think I'm a great communicator as well, but I think it's more from a program perspective of how can we best be serving the people we serve in this changing dynamic. And so there's a redesign going on with all of that, and just trying to figure out the solution there. And then also for us, what's interesting is a lot of our funding comes from our corporate employee engagement programs. And a lot of those programs have been postponed into the fall. And so there's this little bit of a sense at Every Monday Matters that we think these companies are going to get up and running again. And we think that these events and things that have been postponed are going to happen. And so that feels a little bit good for the long tail of this. But but how do we build that bridge today?
Yeah.
To get to that, to get 2, 3, 4, 6 months out from here. And that's one of the things I'm really looking at as with things getting pushed out 6 months, what do I do now to build that bridge to get there?
Yeah, no, good. Well, I think that's really helpful. I know you're a big advocate of self-care as well. And I know all of our stress levels have just naturally gone up. I definitely want to dive a little bit more into that in just a moment. Thanks for those who are asking questions right now. Some of the questions are coming in. There's some technology questions here, so I'm going to address some of that to all of you in the panel, especially Andrew as well. But Dusty, before we jump into it, I think one of the areas that we should talk about is financial planning and strategy. And since you're in the space for loaning, what are some things that organizations, nonprofits should be thinking about during the season? Because, when giving is fluctuating and such, what are some things that people can do? Are there relationships that they should re-engage with banks? And what advice would you give to nonprofit leaders right now?
You bet. Thanks, Charles. I would go back to, first of all, it all starts with that financial planning and the scenario planning of, I would strongly recommend you're putting together a brand new month by month financial plan and looking at least 2 scenarios and probably 3 scenarios, and then building your plans around what do you do with each one of those scenarios. You know, if it's worst case, how do we survive this? In terms of the banking piece, if you're talking to a bank about anything, they're going to want to see what I just described to you. So that's a little insider's tip. They're going to want to know. But if you've got a loan, you just want to be talking to your banker, keeping them happy, letting them know, here's what's going on, here's what our concerns are. If you are working towards getting a loan, I will just tell you, news is my anticipation would be the lenders are going to shut things down for organizations like ours for the next 30 to 60 days at least, until they see how we do with this. So if you're in the midst of trying to get a loan for a building or anything, don't be surprised if it's, hey, let's come back and talk in 30 days. If you've got a line of credit, which many not-for-profits use to manage the ups and downs of cash flow, again, you need to be thinking really serious about that line of credit and what you do with it. You may not have borrowed on it, and your philosophy has always been, I'm not going to borrow on it till I need it because I don't want to be paying interest. What you're up against in the banking world right now is if you wait 30 days to draw on that line of credit, the bank may have turned it off by that point. I'm not trying to be alarmist. I'm just saying, depending on the structure of the agreement, you may not be able to pull on it when you need it. So it's best either to pull that money and set it aside and have it as a reserve. And if the bank won't let you, to sit down and say, these are our models, this is where we think we're going to need it, we're really relying on you to be a partner right now. But you know, the banks are facing incredible pressure right now as well. They're making decisions for their shareholders and their stakeholders in the same way that you are. And unfortunately, they're all scrambling right now, and none of them are focused on your little issue or my little issue, right? They're working on the big loans and the big clients in their portfolio. So you'll learn right now that it pays to build great relationships with bankers when times are good, because if you call now and you're a stranger, you're at the bottom of the list. So it'll be a good time to learn. And I'll just throw out, we're constantly telling not-for-profits, whatever you think is an adequate financial reserve, it's not enough. If you need 3 to 6 months financial reserves, it's too late to tell you that. But we're hoping through this downturn, not-for-profits will learn you've got to do that for times just like this.
Yeah. Andrew, you had a comment you wanted to add?
Yeah, thank you. Dusty, I think your modeling is extremely important. And modeling is very important for the psychological health of your team. And one of the things that we've learned over time and the work that I've done with folks is always create 3 models. And I'll tell you why. The reason we go for 2 models is because it seems natural. The worst case and the best case scenario. And if you only have 2 models, that actually creates incredible stress, because you're actually only thinking about the best case scenario and how we get there, or you start thinking about the worst case scenario. The law of 3 in negotiation, in any type of hostile or difficult environment, the law of 3, it actually opens up creativity with your team, and it takes that psychological stress out. It is more work, but when you're doing modeling, and I would suggest that you do modeling often. You know, it's not a one-time thing that you're doing today, because the variables change. If you could do modeling once a week because of the new variables, but as a leader, deliberately manage the modeling to have 3 models at least. Don't go too far, like 5 or 6, but create 3 models, because what it does is it relieves the stress of the right way and the wrong way versus all of the options, and it actually opens up creative thinking. So think about 3 and do it consistently. Dusty, that is probably one of the most important things to manage the stress with your people, is thinking creatively about it, because that way they can also detach from the situation and think about the situation in that way.
Good. And I would just add, the wisdom of what you're talking about with 3 is get your people out of binary thinking. So if the entire world is yes, no, they get stuck in that. And at the point you force them to put a 3rd option on the table, their thinking goes to at least a second level, and you get away from this yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down. There's always a third way. So yeah, the wisdom of what you just said is huge.
Great. Well, let's talk about technology. I think a lot of the questions coming in are, what are the platforms we need to use? Is Zoom it? Are there other platforms outside of Zoom that could be used for communication on an ongoing basis? I'll first kick it off to Andrew, but then anybody can jump in because all of you are using different suites of technology. And then there was a specific question. People have events planned. I think Amber asked the question here in the chat. We had a gala planned for May 30th in San Francisco. This is our most important fundraiser of the year. We're thinking of doing it virtually. Andrew, I know it just happens that at the top of the hour, you guys are having another webinar that might be closed on virtual events, but maybe Andrew, help us think through some of these elements and think in terms of like going virtual. I think everybody agrees that's what we got to do, but what does that mean? So you have any insights for that?
Yeah, I see that another attendee, Kenny, just responded to that response about going virtual, but it is definitely where we see a lot of nonprofits going, and I think it's wise to start planning ahead. I mean, as you guys have said, this thing is unfolding in different directions day by day. So some people are saying, hey, end of May or June. Some people are hedging their bets that I've spoken with and are still proceeding as if they're going to have in-person events. Other people are trying to plan ahead of the curve and say, hey, just in case, we're going to adapt. And so if you are planning to adapt for stuff around May 30th, I think the key comes down to making it easy for people to access whatever event you have going on, being present in the media streams that they're already on every day. So that includes using live streaming tools that broadcast to things like Facebook Live or YouTube, even things like Twitch, using tools like Streamlabs. Those are all platforms that allow you to reach people where they're already at. And so I think the main thing I want to emphasize in terms of virtual events is making it as easy as possible for people to attend, to make sure they know what they're clicking on, where they're going at what time, and making sure you have testing the technology beforehand to make sure it works, and making sure people can take action, of course, in the same instance where if they're watching some sort of presentation or something, making it easy for them to actually take action and give in that instance as well.
Yeah, so the idea is when people engage whatever platform is, the ability for them to actually act upon whatever is being communicated. So I know there's some concerns even on this thread that, hey, is Zoom going to be able to handle all of this? And I guess we'll see. I'm assuming they've done some planning when they were offering Zoom freely to everyone. I know, Matt, you work with Zoom as well. And so, yeah, so what are some of the, others in this panel right now, what are some other platforms or tools that you're regularly using to stay connected with folks in your network? Anyone else? Chris?
Yeah, I'll just say, I don't know if it's a specific tool, but I think it's important for the questions. Like, our people are going to want to feel connected. And the only way they feel confidence and connectivity right now is through the virtual means. And so let's take advantage of that opportunity, right? I don't even think, sometimes we're thinking, let's to big galas, but it could be a weekly connecting point with your donor base. I mean, find creative ways to rally your community, to keep them in the fold. So that way, you don't just disappear for 3 or 4 months and kind of come back like, okay, we're going to do trips or events or whatnot again. What technologies after this? I'm going to do multiple Instagram, Facebook Live, just connecting with our people, saying, hey, we're here, things are good. Here's some decisions that we've made. So that way, we want to like kind of train, if you will, our people that we're going to be available online more now than ever, and we want to actually bring an opportunity for them to join in. Because everyone's at home trying to figure out, like, we miss our people, we miss our coffee shops, we miss our restaurants, we miss every time we have to delete an event on a calendar, there's a certain level of sadness. So we can create a sense of happiness and connection through even small Zoom events like this as well. So if you're leading a nonprofit, I would find multiple ways to connect big and small online in the next few weeks.
Yeah, Hendrik.
So, I think I noticed that somebody in the chats is putting up a whole bunch of platforms there. So I'm sure you're going to mention them in a second here.
Yeah.
One of the important things for the psychological health of your team, when you're doing a stand-up meeting, you may be doing a daily stand-up. And we made the distinction between, processing, and we made it and work stuff. As a leader, it's important that you declare direction every time and that you create that vision every time. So I was talking to a leader today who was saying, "Oh, I do stand-ups and check-ins every day." I said, well, what's important is that they hear your voice among the storm. If you think about rowers that, there's 8 rowers in the boat, and then there's somebody sitting on the end. I don't know what they call the gentleman or the person sitting there, but he's calling. He's not facing where they're going, but he creates the rhythm. And being able to stand up and say, here's who we are, here's what we're about, and here's where we're going is really important. And you can't overkill it. Say it every time. The second thing that I think is very important when you're talking to your team is the use of a metaphor. A metaphor allows people to detach.
So practical, yeah.
I don't know if you saw yesterday, and maybe you guys don't like him, but I like Matthew McConaughey. But Matthew McConaughey came out with a little tweet, and he talked about resilience and respect. And then he used a metaphor saying, after every red light, there will be a green light. And we are at a red light right now, but we're going to a green light. The powerful use of a metaphor really helps people detach from the situation, the crazy, if you would, and gives them a frame to look at things. So choose a metaphor that's going to work for you. Don't choose a complicated one, because then people will read into it. But a simple metaphor as a leader that you can declare and hold on to it, it anchors people around that. I noticed there was a question around self-care routine and keep your own health in check. And I'll leave to the rest of you guys to talk about that as well. But I think having routine is the number one thing around health. And if you're going to work from home, dress up, don't do it in your pajamas. Work with some sense of purpose. And there's a lot of stuff in that, but hopefully those things are helpful.
Hey,
go ahead, Dusty.
Charles, great piece of technology. I ran across this in a museum the other way, a handwritten letter. I'm thinking about all these organizations we're working with right now, who most of their team are planning a big event every weekend. They don't have that to do right now. And you've got all these other people who are sitting at their homes. I just kind of have this dream of going back to my childhood of all of a sudden I get a handwritten letter that's a thank you from an organization I support or something like that. I think in this time, that level of a personal touch to your key donors, to all your donors, it would just stand out like a flashlight on a dark night.
Yep. That's really good.
Oh, sorry. I was going to just interject, going back to kind of some of the self-care and even just for companies. I think one of the things that we've tried to do, I just have to really applaud our staff. I think when we announced we were going to be working from home, people just started throwing creative ideas out. Today, we'll be doing a team lunch over Google. We use Google quite a bit. We'll be doing a team lunch over Google Hangouts. Everyone's just going to eat in front of each other just so that we can have that community. We had somebody on the team start a optional, if you want to join, funny memes group with memes that relate to, funny things that people are finding to just try to keep people's spirits up. And so, he started that group on Instagram, and I think it's really just in implementing certain things with the team. Whenever we're doing calls, it's going to be video so we can see each other's faces and make sure that people are still doing well and things like that. I think there's a lot of fun things to incorporate. It's a great time to get the team to really jump in and to make ideas like this and make sure everyone's doing okay. And then even just, we have global and office-wide chat groups. And so whether you're on Slack or you're on Hangouts, it's been a great way for us to actually get live updates, especially from our team in South Korea, as they've been doing a lot of outreach to our clients there. And we've been sending messages of encouragement to them, and then they're sending messages back to us. And it's just really incredible, again, just going back, the people that we're working with, to just be able to hear from them too, that our North Korean friends in South Korea are also cheering us on and are encouraging us and asking us to stay healthy and safe as well.
Great. I know one of my good friends, Kenny, he's phenomenal when it comes to digital. He's offered some links there. I'm actually going to allow him to talk. So I love this power I have over my friends right now. But Kenny, why don't you share with us a little bit? You had your hand up.
Hey, how are you? First of all, thank you so much for convening this. I think it's been, I don't know, because we don't even have this connection, this type of resource I think is really good for these leaders. I've recommended it to countless people over the last 24 hours. I really hope
Thank you.
that they have access even to the recording. Yeah, I guess, what do you want me to speak to, Charles, specifically?
Yeah, I think it'd be good because when we're talking about platforms and tools, you're like a master content creator in all different channels. So I know some of that can also feel pretty overwhelming. Like, what have you seen like quick ways with, especially organizations that have limited resources, like which areas, should they be focusing in or thinking about right now?
Yeah, for most nonprofits and faith-based organizations right now, what I'm seeing that these teams that have just woken up to digital, right? Like they've been dabbling in it, and everyone appreciated and understood that we're going to get there eventually, right? But this just has been a complete, like, you're being pushed out of the plane for a parachute jump, right?
Yeah.
The easiest thing that I've seen in terms of adoption and telling people to do is just basically Facebook Live. That's the first, like that's the first baby step, because everyone has universal access to that. And then in that way, I just got off of a conference call with the church that I'm working with in New Jersey. And the thing that I've been preaching with them is that you are no longer an institution, a consultant, an individual, an influencer, a nonprofit, a school. You are now a media entity. Culture has shifted, and culture now, it's Netflix nation, right? They consume culture, they consume content in that way. And so we need to conform to be able to be part of this attention economy. And so the things that we're doing, for example, even this one local church, is they're basically going to look at a grid, like a TV guide. Do you remember in the olden days we had that thing called the TV guide? Right? And so they're launching daily shows. So they're giving some volunteers in the morning to do just a morning check-in. They actually have a fitness instructor. The person's gym got shut down, right? They're no longer allowed to have gym classes. And so she's going to actually do daily instruction via Facebook Live. And then it's going to be open to everybody, right? It's kind of like almost like a step down of a Peloton class, right? It's a live interactive class. They have tutors they've got teachers that they lined up in an afternoon show that every day there's going to be a different teacher, math teacher, science teacher, because all their families and kids are cooped up, but they're going to be going to school. So there's going to be like an open office hours help desk type of Facebook Live show every day, and its consistency is the important thing. So the parents know that every day at 2:00, you can get your kids to hop on Facebook Live and then go get some help, right? And so they're literally trying to fill out the entire timeline grid, all the different day parts, and fill it up with different people from their organization and their community to do something. That's the type of thing that I think is going to work. And then you have ability then to do fun things and curate the entire organization that way, different content, different specialties. And again, this is all for a church. None of it is religious stuff, right? So I just want to, I know you guys all know this, but no one wants to go to a cocktail party where you just talk about yourself all the time, right? You have to be interesting, and that means you need conversation, and that means you need to be thinking about the other party 2 clicks more than you're thinking about yourself. And so even from a local church's perspective, they're doing the right thing, where they're not thinking about themselves. They're literally just thinking parents, coworkers. They've got a whole 5-day series that they're gonna they've got, part of the church has all these executives from New York City, and that have conglomerates, remote teams all over the place. So every day they're going to do like a little mini series of how do you do remote work? How do you set up a home office? What are the tools? So every day there's going to be a different tool that they're going to go over and teach them. Like, what is video screen sharing? what is the recording of the screen, how do you transfer files, you know, the difference between Dropbox and Drive and OneDrive, all those things that probably are native to everyone here on the screen right now. You have to remember those, all these other constituents and organizational, you know, networks, they're not. And so I think becoming relevant, you want to do three things. You want to provide authority, relevance, and trust in this period of time. And you want to be able to show up and be that friend, right? And like, you know who your friends are when things are down. And this is one of those times.
Yeah,
and so I think
really,
every nonprofit can start to use these tools very simply. And Facebook, I think, is that Facebook Live tool is the first place to go.
Yeah. No, I think it's good. And I think the reality is everyone is kind of creating this as we go. So there isn't a pressure to have a super high polished production as you're doing this. And I think the other thing I'm hearing from you,
if you're leading a nonprofit, the reality is that you have a community of people who believe in the things that you believe in, and this is a great opportunity to be an add value to that community and really lead well at multiple levels, not just in the work that you're involved in. Chris, someone asked a question. You mentioned giving donors a space to breathe because they'll need it for the long game. What I also hear from that is that we shouldn't be asking for money right now, just updating our community. When, in your opinion, is appropriate to go back to fundraising? So I guess they're asking, are you saying that we shouldn't be asking for money right now? Your response?
Yeah, I think Hannah had said it great. She was just communicating in the natural general flow, and people gave, right? So when we communicate and drive clarity is kindness. We're going to have people that want to step up and get involved and give. But what we're not going to do is go out to, you know, Helping Now donor community is so incredibly generous and faithful. And every single one of our sectors has been rocked overnight. That's what's unique about this event, is there's no one being spared, no matter how, you know, no matter where you're at. And so for us, just to create some calm, and what we wanted to do is let them know we're not panicking right now. We're good. You focus on yourself, understand your life. We're going to need you, which we say all the time. We will need you because this will become an issue around the globe, and we're going to have to support our leaders. But now one of the things we could do to depressurize their life is for them to know, hey, we're okay now. Here's the next 2 or 3 steps that we're going to take. And in the next 2 weeks, I think Hendry made it clear, the next 2 weeks, we're going to get back to you and let you know on the next key Help Now update. So just try and create some beautiful culture, some key connections. To be clear, I'm not going to ask for specific money, but I'll remind our community again and again that we're going to need them to complete the mission of Help Now. But for now, let them focus on their own health. So play the long game. And I think what we're seeing from our donor base, I hate to say donor base, we never use that word, but really from our advocates who just, you know, really care for us, is we're more worried about 20 years than the next year. So Helping Now just came up with a very clear plan of how we can survive this year, bare bones, and how our programs can survive. And we're going to let our donor base understand, hey, we're cutting way back this year to survive. So that way we all have a little bit of time and space to figure out how big of an event this is going to be. But we're hoping we can actually innovate and take advantage of new opportunities as well. So to us, this is just an opportunity to provide grace and space, but also to create a lot of innovation opportunity to kind of take the next steps as an organization.
Well, we have about 7 minutes left. So, you know, another resource is, once again, I briefly mentioned that Fundraise and Andrew here, they're actually doing a workshop on virtual events. I'm pretty sure this may be too last minute, but I'm assuming you guys are going to record that hour-long webinar, Andrew?
Yeah, it's definitely being recorded, and it'll be accessible on like fundraise.org. I think that we'll be posting it there.
Okay, great. Yeah, because I think like leaning on each other and our expertise to figure out how we're going to support these activities, I think as probably everyone is sensing, this is going to take a while. And I definitely don't want to give some false hope that things are going to be okay by April or May. And I think it's really important during these times that we could somehow figure out a way to share some best practices. One of the reasons our company is doing this is just because, you know, we do work with nonprofits as well as companies. And I'm just hearing from different places like, none of us know what to really do. And I appreciate some of the panelists answering questions on the Q&A page as well, in written form as well. So please, you're welcome to leave some more questions there as well. We'll make sure we're going to actually record this and then send you a link, hopefully sometime today. But let me, I just want to throw out to our panelists, first of all, thank you for being here again. Are there any final thoughts or maybe things that you wanted to cover that we didn't cover? I'm sure we can be on this for 10 more hours and work through each scenario, but any closing thoughts?
Charles, not a closing thought, but could I share just one other perspective on the fundraising?
Yeah.
So not to disagree, I get the whole giving the donors a chance to breathe. But as a donor and as a fundraiser, when something in the world happens as a donor, I want to know what I can do to help.
Mm.
So, on the other hand, if my broker called tomorrow and said, I've got a really hot investment opportunity for you, I wouldn't be angry at him, right? I could use that right now. But in the same way, if there's a not-for-profit who's really seeing something significant, I want to know how I can help. When the tornado hit Nashville, I didn't feel offended that organizations contacted me. I wanted to know how to help. So again, just a slight different perspective there. If you've got something that's a need, my experience through the years has been send it out as an opportunity. If you're interested, here's something you can help with. I've found that donors have amazing capacity to just say no. If they don't want to support something. So anyhow, that was just,
Yeah.
I wouldn't want everybody to go into lockdown mode. If we all get $1,000 check and we can't leave our house, what are they going to do? They're going to spend it with Amazon. And so I think that'd be a good time for them to do something else with it.
Hey, Charles, another thing too is, and maybe Dusty, you can even speak to this as well, but some of Amber's questions that she was asking in the chat just kind of made me think about this whole thing about fundraising and money. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that some nonprofits, they have, plan B and plan C, and they can weather the storm, and they're good for the next 6 months. But I think there's a lot of organizations out there that are saying, how am I going to get through next week?
Yeah.
And the emotional toll that is taking on leaders. And I don't have an answer necessarily for that scenario, other than if it helps to know that, those people are not alone. There's many people out there that are very scared, and this is a tough time. And so, just really all of us thinking about, if there's anything that we can even share with those folks of, I have a dear friend also, their gala was supposed to be this coming weekend, and it's about 70% of their annual contributions, and it's a mess, and I feel so deeply, and I wish I had better solutions. And if anyone does on here, to please feel free to share. I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that group out there, or that leader out there, that this is the reality that they're facing, like right this second.
Absolutely. That's definitely good words. I think, definitely I wish we had more time, but that would be a topic that would be worth discussing with some people who can provide some tactical help, people like Dusty and others here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Hendrik.
Yeah, just lastly, I think, resilience is not the ability to go back to where you were, but resilience is the ability to rise to the moment. And our ability to bring people into the moment, into the present, those who are of a faith community or have that type of frame, it's always about the present, the current moment. We're all doing the planning, and that's what these guys are for. Dusty, great planning. We're all thinking about where we're going, modeling. But when it comes to managing people's emotional state, bring it to the moment where we are. And that's what resilience is bringing people into this moment right now, and then being with people, presencing yourself with them so that they have the experience that we're not alone in this, because where two are gathered, not more than 10 though, but where two are gathered, we're not alone.
Yeah. Anyone else? Hannah or Chris, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I just really agree with Dusty's sentiment for sure, 100% of that. It's definitely a both and right now. So just to drive clarity, that if people want to help support your org, of course, do it. So.
I agree. I would just echo that in the same way. We're also trying to be really mindful and thoughtful, and as we're doing our outreach to some of our really major donors, and even all the way down to just checking in on our chapters and rescue teams, I agree with Dusty. People are looking for ways I think they can help, even if it's not going to be financial, or even if it's just $5. I think we would be really surprised to see how people really want to be brought in. They want to understand what the challenges are. They care about these causes and these organizations deeply. That's why they support them. And so they certainly wouldn't want to see, nonprofits shuttering and folding. So I think that when, we're facing these really desperate times, just to be really honest and to share some of those challenges. And again, even if people are in different situations in these types of scenarios, and so thinking through maybe the different ways in which you're communicating to different types of donors or supporters, and really making sure that you're catering those messages. And it's also very personal as well, that you're doing that one-to-one outreach when it's possible and when it's needed, and things like that. And so thank you for those reminders. I think there are really nonprofits and organizations that are across the spectrum right now facing a number of different types of challenges, but really appreciate you, Charles, for putting this together and just giving a chance for us to get together. I've learned so much as well.
Yeah. Well, everyone, I'll just end with these closing words, and that is, you're definitely not alone in this. And I know all of you are doing significant work, and that work requires more than just your organization. And so I think if in any space that we ought to be collaborating, because there's so much good to be done, is probably in the not-for-profit space. So my encouragement to you is let's stay in touch. I think you have some connections to this webinar via social posts and such. Look some people up that you've heard who've left comments on even the questions, the chat, people here on the screen. And I purposely invited people who are willing to connect and willing to help other groups think through it. So lastly, thank you all the panelists for your time, and thanks everyone for joining, and we'll be in touch soon with a link to the recording. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charles.
Thanks.